Hello, welcome to Dialogue. I'm Pandong in Beijing. At this year's APEC CEO Summit in Lima, the capital of Peru, Chinese President Xi Jinping made a keynote speech as the global economy is struggling to recover with flagging trade and investment, rising protectionism and fragmented trade rules were signals that China sent to the world. How is the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific viewed at the forum, and what decisions were made to facilitate trade and investment and consolidate free trade in the region? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. He Weiwen, Senior Fellow of Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China, and Professor Zhang Lifeng from Fudan University. Before we get started, let's take a look at
President Xi Jinping delivered a strong message in favor of open and free trade. He said the Asia-Pacific region must lead the way in the face of slowing global growth and a rising trend of protectionism.
We
need to commit ourselves to build a community with a shared future, and that should oblige us to come closer together than move apart. We ought to continue deepening and expanding the cooperation in our region. We ought to build a common platform, establish common rules, and share the results of our development. Any attempt to exclude any of us should be rejected.
Xi said Beijing would spearhead a free trade area for all 21 APEC members. He added, China will not shut its door to the outside world, but open more. His speech echoed other leaders' endorsements of free trade, amid fears about a backlash against globalization.
Protectionist tendencies are taking over. And for anybody who wants to promote protection, I suggest they read an economic history of the 1930s.
At a time of uncertainty about the United States' continued commitment to global trade, President Xi's speech sent a message loud and clear that China will continue to be a driving force behind the global economy and trade in the Asia-Pacific region. US President-elect Donald Trump has opposed the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a trade deal which includes 12 APEC members but excludes China.
Well, I think the role of leading vision for the Asia-Pacific that China really has the opportunity to play. Because with the withdrawal, perhaps, of the imminence of passage of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, there really isn't a competing vision at this point that seems to be prominent. So China is able to fill that vacuum, and I think this meeting here in Peru, I think, is an opportunity to do that.
President Xi is combining his attendance at the APEC leaders meeting with his third visit to Latin America since 2013. At a time of uncertainty about the future of US policy in the Asia-Pacific and Latin America, it's a chance for Beijing to deepen its influence in the backyard of the Americas.
So let's get the discussion started. Gentlemen, in his keynote speech, President Xi Jinping described openness as the lifeline of the Asia-Pacific economy. Why openness is so critical at this point, and how serious is the rise of protectionism and the tendency for a reverse globalization, Mr. He?
Yes, I think in general, trade investment is a powerful engine for economic growth because we have fiscal and monetary measures, but they are limited, especially at the background of the poor world economic recovery. So we should rely more on trade investment, but free trade and investment is crucial, especially in the context of the rising protectionism, especially in the US and Europe. We can remember freshly that what happened in the world in the 1930s, during the Great Depression. The Depression was great, partly because of the very strong protectionism in Europe and the US. While the world trade fell by 66% and the US GDP fell by 50%, we cannot afford to repeat that mistake.
What's your take, Professor?
I think, calling for openness in trade, I think is nothing new. But I think this particular message from President Xi Jinping should be seen in the context of, the surprising outcome of Brexit, and also even more surprising, the outcome of the American election. I think this is truly a timely reminder about the tough reality that we are facing, which is, as Mr. He just mentioned, that is the tide and the backlash against globalization, and also the rising tide of protectionism. I think, especially in the light of the U.S. Election result, I think the President-elect Trump has been calling in terms of labeling China as the currency manipulator and also the tough trade tariffs against the Chinese products. I think, we are seeing the reality at two great and the most powerful trading nations in the world may have to come head to head in terms of a trading wars and a currency war. So I really think it is not only a general message, but a message which is very poignant and very timely to remind the reality we are in today.
Right, so to follow up what you've just said, Barack Obama's strong push for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, has obviously failed, and President-elect Donald Trump is unlikely to reinitiate. And this is very interesting. I talked to an economist based in Shanghai last week, and he said TPP is textbook protectionism. So do you think the FTAAP or FTAP, free trade area of the Asia-Pacific, would be much better?
Interesting enough. Of course, FTAP is certainly free trade mechanism. And in the past, actually, APEC during its very beginning, was aimed at free trade and economic integration in the whole region. And so we had the BOGO goal 10 years ago. That is, by 2020, the whole APEC area will become an integrated market with free trade investment. Still, there are many difficulties. So 2 years ago, at the Beijing summit, APEC, we launched a strategic study, or launched FTAP. But at that time, the United States was not that interested. He said, we should not start the feasibility study, but only strategic study. No hurry about the FTAP. The focus is TPP. When TPP is done, then TPP will become the fundamental pathway to FTAP. Now TPP is gone. So FTAP is again the focus. We have to focus on that. It's crucial that whether the Lima summit can really move FTAP and get it going.
So what do you think are the major obstacles in promoting the idea of FTAP? Because as Mr. just mentioned, it was raised 10 years ago. When it can become reality?
I think I agree with the notion that I think the TPP is, in fact, dead. I don't see any possibility of making big progress in this area. And I think, judging by the rhetoric of Donald Trump has been saying during the election campaign, I think the message behind and his slogan of making American great again, I think actually the substance of it is that he wished American will be retreat and more from international arena. I think including trade and other economic areas. So my feeling is generally I'm not a strong believer in multilateral mechanism because it's very difficult to coordinate and very difficult to generate a consensus. I think the FTAP should be taking place within the Asia-Pacific area. I think without some kind of gesture or support from the United States, I don't really see there's a real chance of being successful.
So what's your take, Mr.
Yes, I agree with Professor Zhang. Of course, the death of TPP gives more chances to RCEP or RCEP, and then also give more freeway to FTAP. Because RCEP already covers 12 of the APEC 21 members, and Peru, for instance, is also pushing for RCEP as well. On the other hand, I really believe that FTAP will be faced with more difficulties, especially from the United States. Without strong support from the U.S., it will be very difficult to move on.
The United States is currently the world's biggest economy, and China is the second largest economy. And in his keynote speech, President Xi Jinping said China's own economy, has a promising future, and China's development will present great opportunities to the world. What opportunities is he talking about?
I think that China, is, at least, although is growing slower than in the past, the two-digit growth time is gone forever. Will not come back again. Still, the growth rate is twice as fast as the world average, and 3 times as fast as that in the United States. So with the expanding economy, the market is expanding, the middle class is expanding, the inward investment is expanding, and China's investment to the world is expanding. So that will provide great opportunities to world business, including the U.S. business.
What's your take, Professor?
I think it's really, I think the key issue is that whether we can really work out a win-win strategy or win-win formula in terms of trade and also economic cooperation. So I think at the moment, I agree with totally with Mr. He has just mentioned that I think China is still the engine of growth in the world, but nonetheless, I think China is slowing down and slowing down actually, and not insignificantly. I think judging by the past 2 years. So I think the world now need to live with a slowing down China, and also a slowing down China means that I think the other neighboring countries is going to take a new look about how America's interest will be served, and I think Mr. Donald Trump has been playing up about making American first. American first is the key message. So I think now he is not elected. I think he has to, in a way that make it good about some of the election pledges in terms of industry, protection American market. So I think although it's too early to say, but it looks likely that he may actually carry out some of the threats or pledges.
But are you talking about a strategic contraction of the United States in the Asia Pacific?
I think it's too early to say, but I think the specific the threat which Donald Trump has been saying in terms of tariff and also the China's currency manipulation issue, it's a very serious stuff. Right. And people may say that most of the U.S. presidential and the candidates may only say one thing before they were elected. But many people believe that Donald Trump is a very unconventional politician or a very unconventional and a figure who has no real political experience, but he has the reputation of do what he may say or said.
He's also known as a deal maker. So back to the economy, both of you have mentioned slowing down. It's talking about speed, but what about quality? Because quality growth is also part of the theme for this year's APEC meeting, right?
Oh yes, quality growth is something new, but still the concept should be the same. That means the growth should not be focused on speed, but on the results. The quality growth means we should have growth sustainable, mostly based on innovation and technology advancement, on the improvement of the labor productivity instead of the random extension of production in overcapacity. So quality growth, I think, should be contained for sustainables. First, structural sustainable. Second, is fiscally sustainable, not with creating so much fiscal deficit, and financially sustainable, not too much corporate debt, and then environmentally sustainable. So that is quality growth.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be getting back to you very soon. You're watching Dialogue on CCTV News. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about President Xi Jinping's keynote speech at this year's APEC CEO Summit in Lima. So, gentlemen, in his speech, President Xi Jinping also called for the member economies of APEC to enhance connectivity and to achieve interconnected development. Why interconnectivity is so important?
Of course, connectivity means different connectivities. First, physical connectivity. You have to launch infrastructure investment to make the goods flow possible. So that in this particular aspect, we should mention about the major trunk railway project linking the two oceans, Pacific and Atlantic. Still is at the early stage. There's fiscal connectivity. Then institutional connectivity. We should promote trade facilitation, trade liberalization, and integrated market. And then people-to-people connectivity to make all our people cooperate closely.
Well, Professor, so how do you think, in this context, how do you think China's Belt and Road Initiative and the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank can fit in?
I think in the past 3 or 4 decades, I think China has been known for being the champion of manufacturing, especially manufacturing of household goods and even white goods. I think China should be given credit in terms of coming up with a new concept of one road and one belt. And also I think over the past few years that I think has gained a bit more acceptance for this particular initiative. But I think still a long way to go. So my feeling is that the AIIB, in my personal view, is probably is one of the most substantial things that we have witnessed in the context of one belt and one road. I think the AI is now going to make some real impact, especially in terms of the infrastructure and investments. I think China has been a great beneficiary of investment in basic infrastructure, in road, in railways, and also in other means of facilities. So I think, and also it is also in China's interest, because China now already have a very impressive capacity in terms of infrastructures. So my feeling is that I totally agree with Mr. He just mentioned that I think the physical and also the cultural and also the intergovernmental. But I think before anything could happen, I think probably the governmental connectability, I think is the most important driving force.
Are you saying
unless
that
the government
it's a
can
challenge?
work together, I think it is a challenge.
Okay.
I think one belt, one road is far from a reality. I think it would take many years or even decades to bear the fruit. But I think we will see whether the member country in the region can really work together. I think certainly in the context of Latin America, because this is a context, a continent where China and the people there, the country there, don't have any legacy issues. That's why I think although it's slightly invisible on the Chinese media, but actually this is one region which we have seen a lot of substantial progress in terms of a partnership between China and also the region.
So what kind of progress have you seen in Latin America?
Oh yes, we have made tremendous progress in Latin America. First, the trade. In 1979, the trade volume between China and Latin America was just $1 billion, $1.2 billion. And the year in 2014, because last year we saw a slight decrease, 2014 is $264 billion, over 200 times growth. It's one of the fastest growth in the bilateral trade. And now Latin America, the trade volume between Latin America and China is only smaller than its trade with the United States. China is already the #1 trade partner for Brazil, and so on and so forth. Very important. And China's investment in Latin America is also significant. Latin America and the Caribbean included accounted for about 1/8 of China's total outbound investment stock, and it's still growing.
So how do you see the risk management in this massive investment process? Because geologically it's far away, and politically some Latin American countries have seen some instability in recent years.
Yes, I think first of all we should do homework, no hurry to start, to analyze carefully and thoroughly the risk distribution in different regions. And in the region or in the country, different risks. We have 10 different categories of risks we have to understand carefully. Then we should try to find out the projects with less risks, with the lower risks, important thing among all these factors is any project should fit very well to practical social and economic development needs of the host country. Only when that can two governments work together. Even if the government changes, the new government will continue because they need it. So we should adapt to their local needs and work seriously and no hurry, step by step. And we should also cooperate with the local business and local banks, local advisories, and all local sources thoroughly.
Well, Professor, historically, the United States saw Latin America as its backyard. Do you think China's developing investment and cooperation with Latin American countries will raise some flags in the United States?
I think it's fair to say that I don't think America has been comfortable. I think with the rise of investment in China, and I think I remember I visited Chile a couple of years back, and the cooperation between Chilean banking and the Chinese banking is, to my great surprise, I think, those areas are normally under a lot of protectionism. But I think in that part of the world, I think it's rather open, I think, to the Chinese, both the Chinese companies as well as to the Chinese and capitals. So I think it is a new continent that, on the one hand, I agree with that. I think the political risks that China may have to think about. But on the other hand, in terms of regional protectionism, probably this is the continent which is the least unwelcome to the Chinese capitals. So I think there's a balance. I think like any trade or business decisions, I think risk is part of everyday life. And China now have abundance of capital, and China now have abundance of capabilities or qualities. It needs somewhere to go.
So talking about Latin America, we know that this is the third time President Xi Jinping has visited Latin America since he took office in 2013. He visited Ecuador, a historical visit, first time by a Chinese head of state to that country before he went to Peru, and he will visit Chile later. So. So how do you see that dynamic that China has established this comprehensive strategic partnership with those countries? Explain this diplomatic term for us in plain words.
Interesting enough, in each of the Latin Americans where President Xi Jinping has visited, we all set up comprehensive strategic partnership because we don't have geopolitical contradictions with those countries. That's first one. And the second one, economically, they need China's support and help, and we are willing to do that. It's also good for us. And thirdly, we should, if we look at the globe, we have Europe, North America that's developed, and Asia. We're working closely, especially focus on ROB, the first on Asia. And then Africa. We have 3 years strategic cooperation in 10 different fields. Then Latin America. This is a great potential. We have to develop energetically trade, investment, and cooperation with it.
Right, gentlemen, you both reckoned earlier that the U.S. strategy in the Asia-Pacific is a very important factor in the future development of. Do you think President-elect Donald Trump will overhaul Barack Obama's Asia-Pacific strategy economically?
I think there's a two school of thinking. I think on the one hand that people who know the President-elect Trump is saying that he's someone with a very strong and business instinct. He's very pragmatic, and also he doesn't like rhetoric. He see the things, and so a couple of days ago there were reports saying that. Many Americans believe that Americans may have missed a good opportunity participating in AIIB. So they raised the possibility of maybe under Trump's administration, an American can actually remedy that. Maybe Trump will allow some form of participation and on the AIIB. But I think this is not what Trump has said, but this is one of the advisors which and Mr. Trump has mentioned that might be a possibility, but it's still too early to say.
What do you think, Mr.?
Economically, I strongly believe that Donald Trump will sooner or later come back to free trade with Asia Pacific, because Asia Pacific accounts for 60% of U.S. total global trade. Without a strong liberalized trade investment cooperation in this area, there's no hope that the U.S. economy can grow by 3 or 4% per year, as Donald Trump has envisaged.
So what about Russia? Do you think Russia will play an important role in the Asia-Pacific's near future?
I think geopolitically, Russia will play a good role. I cannot say a very important role. It will play a good role because both China and Russia are global players, and we have strong responsibilities in global hot issues. And so in this area, China and Russia are linked together, and geopolitically, we work together, can play a bigger role. Economically, Russia is not a big player in this region. Still, it's energetically focused on development in the East, Far East, and looking more to Asia. So this provides fresh chances for us, and we can work together not only bilateral framework of Asia Pacific.
So, Professor, back to the APEC framework, what do you think would be the major challenges in the near future?
I think the major challenge, will be for China is work out a more, a real and effective relationship with neighboring countries. I think Japan is still a known factor in the new context. Although I think the tension between China and a South Asian country is now easing, especially in the context of the Philippines. But I think it is still, I don't think it is a certainty. I think some of the old issues, the legacy issue is now gone. And I think if America and Donald Trump will retreat from what he used to call the pivot to Asia, that might actually give China a better opportunity, I think, to work out the relationship. But as I said, we are still only within 10 days of U.S. election results, and I think the picture is far from clear, and just wait and see.
What's your take, very quickly, Mr.
Yes, I think better we wait and see. And Donald Trump will again get involved in Asia Pacific, both economically and politically, sooner or later.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input. And that's it for this edition of Dialogue on CCTV News. I'm Pan Deng in Beijing. Bye-bye.